Welcome to the Education Corner, a podcast by Education Choices magazine.
Education Corner podcast would like to welcome Mr. Kevin Doble, Principal of the Broomwood Schools Group in Clapham, South West London. And we're very thrilled that we're able to welcome you to our Education Corner podcast. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your career to date?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me on. I trained as a lawyer, did a postgraduate degree in business management, and then was thrust into the giddy world of banking, which was, well, not for me. So after having endured that for a small period of time, I was lured over to England. I'd done my postgraduate training in South Africa, in Johannesburg, essentially to join a prep school and coach some hockey and cricket, which I thought was a marvellous idea for 6 months before I went back into a proper job. Anyway, that was about 30 years ago. Didn't go back. Was dragged through a PGCE through the Roehampton Institute. It was absolutely brilliant, focusing on secondary English. And since then, I've worked predominantly in the south of England, in almost exclusively in prep schools. I did teach A-level English for a brief period of time, but it's been one heck of a ride. All of the schools, bar the last two, have been boarding schools, and so very much used to what I'd call the broader prep school experience. But certainly in the last two schools in which I've worked, Shrewsbury House, where I was head for 11 years, and then subsequently here as principal of the Broomwood Group, Northwood, as it were, the schools are as close as you're likely to get to boarding schools without beds. So quite an eclectic journey, but absolutely no regrets, and very much looking forward to the next day, which is probably likely to be as unpredictable as the previous one.
Sounds very exciting. And what do you feel from the experiences that you've been able to contribute to the Broomwood Schools since you've been in your role as principal?
Well, one of the targets that I was given by Catherine Colquhoun and Sir Malcolm was to find ways in which we could create greater cohesion between the three schools. And I'm referring here to Broomwood Hall Lower School, which is the pre-prep, the Broomwood Hall School, of course, the girls' prep school, and Northcote Lodge, the boys' prep school. And over the course of the last couple of years, we've gone through some very significant changes. The first of which, as I was informed on my first day as I was chief executive, was that the schools were being sold. We were then acquired by Duke's Education, and they've been absolutely fantastic. We've had an opportunity to be able to learn from a number of hugely experienced educators, heads, administrators, amongst others, whose overall awareness of educational delivery has been superb. And what we've been given the opportunity to do is to ensure that the schools remain not just relevant, but also to ensure that they become much more cohesive. So in the last year and a half since I've been at these schools, the role has been to try and bring them closer together, to try and make certain that the education which we offer is a proper prep school education. And although the two prep schools are single-sex schools, we want to make certain that the education that the children are enjoying is consistent, it's relevant, it's absolutely fit for purpose, and build on the extraordinary work that particularly Catherine Colquhoun was able to present over the last several years. So it really is, in summary, it's taking the transition from being a proprietorial set of schools to a group within the Duke's organisation, but also bringing the schools together to create greater cohesion and collaboration.
And you've got some wonderful sites as well in the prime part of London. Can you explain to me and to anyone listening the reasoning for the changing of the school group to Broomwood?
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably the key point to make here is that this is something that had been a conversation and part of the school strategy long before I joined, and significantly longer before Duke's acquired the schools. You've just mentioned we've got some fantastic sites. We've got some wonderful settings. 4 schools with 4 different names, including here our senior school, which will leave us to become part of London Park School, another Duke's organisation next year. But 4 schools, 4 names, 5 brands, 6 sites. The children begin their time at Broomwood Hall Lower School with their particular uniform. The girls then go on to Broomwood Hall Upper School. They carry on with a similar uniform. The boys begin at Broomwood Hall Lower School. They then move on to Northcote Lodge. And in the past, this was very much a separate school. You needed a new deposit, for example, to join, as well as a new uniform, new systems, new synergy. The reality was that there was no obvious synergy between these schools in terms of either the way in which they were presented, their brand, or indeed the direction that the curriculum took. We've enjoyed some fantastic evolution of young people at both of the two prep schools, but they travel a slightly different pathway. And insofar as that's a good thing for boys and girls in some ways to have that slightly more bespoke journey, when it comes to educational opportunities, it seemed to be slightly daft that we were heading in slightly different directions. So what we wanted to make certain was that we were cohesive. The parents want to know that the schools under the same ownership are united in their outlook. They have commonalities. They make the lives of the parents easier. And equally, we want to make more opportunity for the boys and the girls to work together more frequently. We have these two prep schools, which are single sex, but why on earth aren't we doing a huge amount more together so that parents can have their cake, or the children can have their cake and eat it? They can be in single sex schools with all the benefits that those entail, but at the same time also have the chance to go on trips, to enjoy programs of study together, to be in the same play, to be in the same house and compete perhaps at sports day together. So these are all of the things that have been considered for several years, the culmination of which was our announcement in October that we were becoming Broomwood, something which the heads had been discussing for some time and which we were very pleased to announce.
Wonderful if you're a parent with a boy and a girl that you feel that your children are kind of sharing their learning experience. Broomwood have just rebranded, as you've been saying. And can you explain the logo, the stag's head? What's the significance and meaning of this to the group?
Yeah, a lot of conversations around this. What we wanted to do is to make certain that we retained our heritage. And if you look at that stag, it is quite distinctively a bee, but also it's the stag. So the bee obviously from Broomwood, the stag from Northcote Lodge, coming together in one form in a way that emblemizes, that symbolizes our coming together as a group of schools, or rather reinforces that.
And we understand that there's going to be a new boys prep building. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, absolutely. Northcote Lodge is, just in terms of its vibrancy and its prep school culture, is fantastic, but it needs to have a little bit of work just in terms of the way in which we manage traffic, the way in which we organise the opportunities that the boys have, and particularly the spaces where they play and where they congregate, which at the moment is not quite fit for purpose. And so what we were hoping to look at was introducing a junior section to the school, which is something that many schools, many prep schools will have in common with us. Our decision to bring the boys and the girls into the prep schools in year 3, in line with the vast majority, almost exclusive amount of prep schools, has also been announced. And this new building will act as the junior section. So it'll keep these boys together in classes as they would expect to be, perhaps in Key Stage 2 previously, but also allow them to be part of a dynamic school. Equally, we want to provide a back playground that is less concrete and metal and more opportunity for bouncing and fun without breakage, which unfortunately has been par for the last couple of years in some ways. But it's going to be a junior section. It's important to announce that we're not increasing the size of Northcote. The size will remain exactly the same. We're rather segmenting it into 6 different year groups as opposed to the current 5.
Fantastic, very exciting. Could you tell us a little bit about the points of entry and requirements for children and families considering applying to Broomwood?
Absolutely, and we've seen a huge uptick in interest, particularly over the course of the last several months. The first, and by some distance the best way of starting this journey, is to visit the school. Come along, particularly if the children are much younger, and visit the lower school, the vicarage. As it stands, say it's £100 registration and then £50 for siblings thereafter. Reception entry, so for children currently at the age of 3.5, 4, is 18 months before entry. So this is a registration and a visit by the end of March, usually. For the rest of the children, we have several points of entry, but this is usually done by year going into the reception age as a random ballot, meaning that parents who wish for their children to join will have their children's names placed essentially into a hat, and those names will be drawn out of the hat. So siblings take priority, as do children of old boys and girls. And then all others who are registered are drawn randomly by birthday quartiles. So we try to keep the balance of the age groups fairly consistent. In reality, those who really want us do tend to end up getting a place at the same time. It's also important to understand that reception isn't the only time at which children can join. We can announce, of course, as we did in October, that children can join in at Little Broomwood, which is our new preschool class opening in September 23. The registrations for interest have now opened, and that would be in the half term the year before entry. And then for the prep schools, as long as you register and visit by the end of November in the year before entry, you would be then invited to taste and assessment days in January or the year of entry. Every other year group, it depends on spaces being available. We are flexible. We do want to work around the family's needs. And so if somebody, for example, is arriving mid-year, we will look to provide support for them to accommodate them and find the best route in.
And so helpful to families that perhaps have had to transition or come over from abroad. Which schools do Broomwood tend to send children to at 11 plus or more like 13 plus?
We send both 11 and 13. We don't discriminate against either. It's entirely up to the family as to which of those two entry points at secondary level they prefer. If we look at the girls, a range of schools, the schools which have featured most predominantly over the last several years have been Waldingham, Jags, Elaine's, Benenden, Downhouse, Mary's Ascot, Bradfield, Marlborough. So you can see a broad range of schools. For the boys, Dulwich, Whitgift, Harrow, Eton, Tunbridge, Bradfield, Charterhouse, Marlborough, Wellington. Names that are pretty recognisable. But I think the key thing to understand here is that the schools to which we send our young boys and girls, either at 11 or 13, will be the schools at which they're likely to flourish. They're the decisions made by the parents. Of course they are. What we will do is provide significant amount of advice and guidance. We'll provide the evidence to back up the thoughts that we have. I'm very excited about joining Northcote Lodge in February as head, where I will have a chance to be able to speak to the mums and dads about how their sons are developing, how well I know them, and I'll get to know them very well, I hope very rapidly, but also explain to them my knowledge of the secondary sector, something that Louise McCafferty does fantastically at Broomwood, whether it's day school, boys or girls school, single sex, or indeed boarding or weekly boarding. Our intention is to provide options and explain why it is that the schools that we recommend, and a very broad range of them, would be excellent schools for the children. So wide range. I think in the last few years, we've sent to 115 different schools in the last 15 years. And many of those children, some 34 last year, on scholarships or awards. So I think a pretty good record.
And wonderful that it's not a limited vision. It's much more about the child. The school motto is to do your best, to be your best. Can you just talk a little bit about what that means?
Well, I think the key thing for our kids is to make certain that they have opportunities to understand where their strengths are. One of the great frustrations that I have about prep school education, particularly for younger children, is that there is an expectation that schooling is all about preparing for the next stage. And apparently the role of a fantastic prep school is to get you into a really good secondary school, which of course it is in many ways. I mean, of course that's relevant. And, any great prep school will be able to provide that advice to parents. But fundamentally, the role of an exceptional school is to provide opportunities for young people to understand what they like, what they may not necessarily like yet, where they have interests and strengths, by giving them a broad range of opportunities to engage. And I become incredibly frustrated when the narrowness of an assessment curriculum reduces this range of opportunities, the opportunity for children to try stuff, to almost being superficial or facile. To be your best, to do your best, either way you say this, it's about knowing who you are. It's about having an opportunity to get stuck into all sorts of different things, irrespective of whether you might pass or fail or be exceptional or frankly, not particularly good at it at all. Children are children once. They have this one childhood, the one opportunity to do things for the sake of it. It is the role of a school to give them the opportunity to have that access, whilst at the same time providing them the scaffold to employ those experiences into opportunities to grow, but also to demonstrate ability and to understand how it is that they're going to get to whatever next stage is. So if somebody said to me, what is the one thing that you want to see a child possess when they move on from a prep school, a proper prep school, I would say it isn't necessarily just the academic success story or the lessons learned, the knowledge gained, the skills acquired. It's a mindset that says, I'll have a go. That's key. This notion that children should not be petrified of failure, that they should be prepared to say, I'll have a bash at that. I might absolutely suck, or I might be really good. It doesn't matter, because goodness me, they're going to have the rest of their lives to be judged mostly by themselves or by others. For goodness sake, give them a chance right now to have a go, to have a bash, and demonstrate what they might be great at.
We all know that they're going to need a lot of resilience. Furthermore, can you talk to us a little bit about the bursary provision that Broomwood offers?
Yeah, we are very keen to make certain that our families are able to have some consistency and continuity in the journey that they take with their children. And if anything, the last several years have demonstrated to us that security and consistency in our lives is something we can't take for granted. Our bursarial support extends to families whose children are at the school, but for whom life has become a bit tough and for whom the opportunities which previously may have been available are no longer there. So what we want to do is to protect the children's journey by supporting the parents in whichever ways that we can to ensure that the education is uninterrupted.
And as a school, you work closely with the local community and obviously other South West London-based schools. Could you tell me a little bit about the work that you do, engaging with the local community, and how it not only benefits local families, but also perhaps the children within Broomwood?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're so lucky to be in an environment that is so vibrant and eclectic in different ways. We want the children to understand and recognise that they are citizens of their community and that they will benefit enormously from the engagement within it. We've got to balance this, of course, against extraordinarily busy lives and lifestyles that are at times incessant in terms of scheduling, in terms of priorities, in terms of commitments. But we have to make time to be parts of our community. And we do this through engineering a wide range of activities and projects to give children access and exposure to our community. For example, we work very closely at the moment with St George's Hospital, where we're looking to, through the children's endeavours, raise funds in order to spruce up and brighten up their children's wards, which are in extraordinarily sad state of disrepair. The children, by contributing to this overhaul of such an important space, develop an empathy, I suppose, with those who are forced into having to spend a great deal of time there. It could be one of them as well. We work with Little Village, gathering and sorting out donations to make certain that those who are less fortunate than we are around and about us have got access to the things that perhaps, again, we take for granted. We work closely on Wandsworth Common in ensuring that this extraordinary green space right next to our schools remains clean, pristine. We pick up litter, we march out and look after aspects of that common to keep it clean and sprightly. We visit local care homes, helping with Harvest Festival donations. We visit local churches in the same way, particularly at Christmas time, to provide voice and good spirit. A whole raft of different ways in which we want to become not only aware of what happens within our community, but a part of it. We don't want to be the school behind the closed doors. And ever increasingly now, we want to become engaged and very much a visible part of what is one of the most fantastically eclectic and vibrant areas of London, of England.
I agree. How do you feel in light of the many events over the past couple of years that as a school you're embracing equality, diversity and inclusion?
Well, this can be presented in different ways. Firstly, we want to make certain that we don't come across as being exclusive, and by which I mean we don't want to give the impression that there are any people who would be excluded from being welcome to our schools. We need to make that point loud and clear. We are very keen to make certain that our environment is one in which our values are best lived. And one of those values, and well, all of those values are connected to being good people who consider others and who recognize and value diversity. So we're making sure that we open our doors more, as I've mentioned before. We make certain that people realize that we, in our educational delivery and our curriculum, incorporate a variety of topics to keep us and our children connected to the priorities which are so important today, whether it's sustainability, whether it's an awareness of the rights of each other, the fundamental British values, which are now very much a part of every school's curriculum. These are critical things for us to be able to not only to embrace, but also to celebrate. So we're being proactive in making certain that we see ourselves as being inclusive and open. but that we live that through the way in which we teach and the way in which we engage and enjoy our engagement with our local community.
And finally, what's your vision for the future of the Broomwood schools going forwards?
Well, as I mentioned before, Broomwood is going to be a proper prep school model. I'm going to use this word proper in a pretty definitive way. Children will arrive at Little Broomwood, our nursery, at a young age of 3.5, 4, and they will move on from our schools either at 11 or 13. For me, the most important thing is that they have a proper prep school experience. And I've spoken earlier on about how important it is that we provide opportunities for children to engage across a myriad different skills and educational access points. We want them to enjoy discovery. We want them to be able to understand and recognize the absolute value of academic preparation, the necessity for developing skills, the fundamental value of cognitive growth and maturity. But we don't want that to be at the expense of them being children. We want them also to learn and recognize how even more important it can be to learn how to be creative, to learn how to be empathetic, to be able to have a go at things that may not necessarily have some material benefit right now, but in whose experience and in the trying provides perhaps triggers for all sorts of other interests and skills which otherwise would never have been discovered. So in short, we want them to be able to play. We want them to be able to fail. And I know that sounds nuts coming from a school leader, but without learning how to fail in an environment that is caring and conducive to that educational journey, how on earth are we going to expect them to be able to tolerate the extraordinary bouncing around and at times debilitating terrors of adult life? So it's equipping them with that mindset to have a go, which I mentioned earlier on, but also making certain that within this fantastically well-structured academic preparation and celebration, this acceleration of intellectual and cognitive skill, that they are also given a chance to be children, to play, to scream and laugh, and to be able to recognize that actually life is great. Life isn't about the next day. Life isn't about your developing skills that are going to present you as some form of valued individual in years to come. Life is about now. And sometimes it's about stopping and staring. And sometimes it's about doing stuff that is completely useless and irrelevant. But all of those things go into making us the characters who in due course are best positioned and best able to live life, not just endure it and prepare for the next stage.
Thank you so much, Kevin. It's been a real pleasure hearing about Broomwood, and it sounds like such an exciting learning environment. And I will look forward, hopefully, to coming and seeing the new boys' school in the near future.
Claire, you'd be so welcome. And as I say to all of the mums and dads and others out there, come and have a look around. You know, the best people, you can hear old fogies like me prattling on about all bits and pieces all the time, but just listen to the children talking. They're the ones who are the greatest ambassadors. They're the ones who'll tell you as it is.
It sounds very exciting. I can't wait to hear more about what it is they're trying out. And it sounds like it's going to be quite an exciting time going forwards.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I'm going to hold you to that. We're going to get you down here and you're going to come do tea.